Good afternoon, everyone. So, welcome to the session Leveraging Science to Accelerate Change in Practice. And today we have a wonderful panel with us. Alongside, we have presenters from 5 different continents, and we're really looking forward to listen to them. At the same time, I'm your host for today. I'm Tahmidul Islam. I work with WaterAid Bangladesh, and alongside me, I have 2 other moderators who are helping us moderating this session online and offline. So Samia Anwar Rafa, she's here on site moderating this session, and Zarif Oishik is moderating the online session. So whenever you have any question from online and offline, for the online participant, please write to the chat box. For the offline participants, like the on-site participants, please keep it with you. We will have segments of questions between the presentations. So let me start with the session, and to start the session, I'll actually invite Mr. Mustafizur Rahman from Embassy of Sweden in Bangladesh to set the tone, to set the setting that why we are holding this session today and what is expected. She got like 15 years of experience in the development sector, and welcome, Mr. Mustafiz.
Thank you very much for inviting me. So, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and warm welcome to the session dedicated to the theme of leveraging science to accelerate change in practice. We are delighted to have you join us as we embark on a journey to explore how the power of science can catalyze transformative shift in our world. So, in the next few moments, we'll be joined by a remarkable researcher from across the globe, representing the 5 continents that shape our planet. Their insight and experiences will explain the remarkable ways in which research has reshaped conventional norms. Starting into the dynamics interplay between technology and investigative methodologies, will uncover how these advancements are influencing the decision made by individuals and shaping the strategy of decision makers. So our world stands at a crossroads, grappling with complex and urgent challenges like climate change, the far-reaching consequence of COVID-19 pandemic, and the pervasive inequalities that persist, and also water crisis and energy transition and food security are related to this crisis. And in facing this difficult obstacle, the collaboration of scientists, government bodies, civil society, business, and community organization becomes paramount. Science serves as both guiding lights for informed decision-making and bridge for conversation surrounding these critical issues. However, the dialogue between scientist and decision-maker isn't always seamless, and this session aims to address these gaps. As we investigate into the heart of this enlightening session, we will uncover how science can act as a catalyst for transformative change. Through revealing narratives, we'll witness the impactful outcomes that arise when scientists and decision makers connect their efforts. We'll also examine the potential difficulties of miscommunication and misalignment, and more importantly, we'll chart a course towards rectifying these challenges. By harnessing the full potential of science, we can collectively make a path towards a brighter future. Our journey commences with the voices of distinguished researchers, is hailing from a different country, is bringing their unique perspective to the forefront. This concise yet compelling talks will showcase how visionary ideas can be translated into tangible solutions, fostering the real-world improvement. Furthermore, our esteemed presenter will provide invaluable insight into effectively conveying a scientific concept to individuals in position of influence, ensuring that the power of knowledge is harnessed to its fullest extent. Following these insightful talks, we'll transition into dynamic panel discussion featuring experts from diverse domains such as education, government, business, and community organization. Through their eyes, we will gain a deeper understanding of how scientific insights can be translated into the actionable strategy, thus closing the gap between theory and impactful practice. This discussion will not only spotlight the challenges encountered, but also propose practical solutions for integrating scientific wisdom into our everyday decision. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we extend our warmest welcome to these transformative sessions. Your presence and engagement express the spirit of collaboration and curiosity that drive positive change in our world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mustafiz. And though it's a silent room, but you can clap silently as well. Okay, so with that note where he started, we'll actually move towards listening to the experience from renowned or profound researcher around the world. And we'll start actually with Bangladesh. Professor Muhammad Jakaria. He's from North-South University. He's a professor on environmental science and management, and he's going to share two prominent experience where he actually worked for research level and implemented it at practice and policy level. So over to Mr. Jakaria, Professor Jakaria. And all the presenters are actually online.
Okay, can you hear me, Tamir?
Yes, we can hear you. Please continue.
Yes, we can hear you.
Is my screen is visible?
Yes, your screen is visible.
So I'm sure you have started counting my time. Thank you very much. So you can start counting my time now. So I am having some difficulties with my audio, video. I don't know what's going on here. It's not very good, right? So can I turn off for what?
The screen, right?
Yeah, right. So if you look at my screen, thank you very much, the panel member, and Hamid, the moderator for these sessions, for inviting me for this important session. As Hamid mentioned, I'll be discussing about two important issues that we are working with. The first one is we'll be talking. Right, so it's taking some time. Yeah. So we would like to discuss about the arsenic is a major issue, still an issue, not only in Bangladesh, globally. We have done enough, but we're still sort of trying to do a lot of things to accomplish so that people can get safe water. So we'll be talking about experience from Sonargaon, is in a sub-districts in Bangladesh. What are we doing actually? What is really going on there in terms of getting safe water sources? So if you look at this here, drinking water options in Bangladesh have changed from surface water to groundwater, mainly to avoid bacterial contamination. Later in 1980s, we found arsenic contamination in groundwater. So local driller of two wells initially promoted an indigenous solution, which was later validated by scientific knowledge. The indigenous idea was to target red or brownish sediments instead of previously targeted white sediments for availability of safe surface, arsenic-free safe surface water. So look at this here. If you look at the map here, the color of the sediments. So these are the target which really initially identified the local driller. So later, because of the heterogeneity of the layer, both drillers and villagers were facing difficulties in targeting the layer. So in order to overcome this situation, we came up with the concept of preparing safe water atlas for each village in that sub-district, so that villages are aware of their safe water options, right? So this is a picture of that actually. So we have come up with this map so that people who are living in this area, they know what is the safe depth for that village. But recently, we identified another risky practice of the rural villages, which is the attaching submersible pump. If you look at this here, how the water sources shifted, and we are talking about this one. So people are using submersible pump to lift water in an overhead tank, with the size of the tank is about 1,000 liter. So these new practices resulted in the misuse of huge volume of water, because if you look at this here right side, traditional use, manual use, about 200 to 30 liter per household, which is now turned to 1,000 liter per households per day. So which means that a huge amount of water is getting wasted every day, which is really huge waste. And without immediate policy attention, we will face severe depletion of groundwater, even in rural areas, which ultimately will jeopardize our attempt to achieve food security. So this is a serious issue we discovered. So we are trying to convince our policymaker so that we can sort of at least do something in this particular area so that people can get safe water on a sustainable basis. Otherwise, the people, even in the rural areas, they will also face scarcity of water. They've already started facing it, but the situation will be aggravated in the future. So we really need to do something towards achieving sustainable water, producing sustainable water sources. All right, so this is the first case study I wanted to share with you. And the second one is basically another important, the project that I would like to share with you is the need for developing innovative ICT-based solutions for our fecal sludge management. You know, in Bangladesh, basically we're facing sanitation system is mostly on-site based. A combination of hygienic and non-hygienic type of toilets are used in the peri-urban and in the villages. So in Soitpur, one of the municipal areas of Bangladesh, we conducted a study to develop this method with financial support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation through WaterAid Bangladesh, right? So with the help of the Kobo Collect software, so we collected different types of information like the toilet types, containment size, number of uses of each toilet, along with the coordinates from about 19,000 households in that municipal area. So later the information, if you look at this, the diagram here will tell you everything. We started collecting this information, and later the information was, if you come to this point, was processed using mathematical model and backend statistical analysis, and finally displayed on a dashboard at City Corporation office, like here, either in tabular form or in a map, right? So the map is, if you look at this map here, so these are the information we collected, toilet types, emptying process, and also the disposal system. But you can see here, there are 31% people are discharging in the drain, which is a matter of concern, right? So the technology that we developed, the system that we developed, basically, this is the dashboard, right? So the statistical analysis, and finally it will be displayed on the dashboard. So this particular map is marked with different colors. You can see here the different colors starting from red, green, and yellow. So green means that the containment is empty. The red color in the map is tank is still full, and there is a warning yellow color, the tank will be full in a month time, right? So which means that this particular information will be useful just to sort of get an idea when a particular person should seek support to empty their tanks. And you see, the most important thing is the dashboard will allow both the local authority and the households to be informed about the status of their containment. Additionally, the system will also send automatic SMS to both the offices and the user so that they can take immediate action. So this particular dashboard is innovative in the sense that it will help the city corporation identify non-compliant houses for further action, which ultimately will help improve the overall sanitation systems in Bangladesh. So that's basically another idea. And we are hoping that if you have this kind of system in place, so that will be very powerful, not only to raise your awareness, but also to take actions both from city corporation and also from the user's point of view. So that's all about from my side. So thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, so we got a silent clap from this side. I hope you can listen. Okay, so thank you so much for your insightful presentation. Now we'll move to South American continent. So we'll listen to experience from Dr. Jocelyn Tapia. She is a professor at Catholic University of the North in Chile, and she conducted research in geochemistry, mining activities, geochemical baseline, and arsenic, of course. So let's hear from Ms. Jocelyn Tapia. Over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. So this afternoon, I'm going to talk about arsenic water policies in the region of the Altiplano Puna. Okay, in South America. With a group of researchers, we've been studying the arsenic concentration in different areas of the Altiplano Puna, which is characterized by a high elevation above sea level. It's above 3,800 meters above sea level, and it's inhabited by locals that are used to consume water with high concentrations of arsenic. The main characteristics of the Altiplano are shown in these figures, where you can see that it's located in the central part of South America, and it's divided in the Altiplano to the north and the Puna to the south. And the Puna is a little bit higher than the Altiplano. And in both morphologies, it has been found that the population's been consuming for a long time concentrations, important concentrations of arsenic in water. And in a recent study we made with Murray et al., we made like a classification of these areas, and we focus on the volcanism in the central volcanic zone. Can I go to the next slide, please? Thank you. And first, we made some assessment in 2018, and in 2018 we discovered that there are different types of water that have different concentrations of arsenic, and different types of sediments that have different types of concentrations of arsenic. But we discovered that the younger volcanic rocks are related to higher concentrations of this element. And in relation to waters, brines and saline water, and obviously acid drainage are the ones that have the higher concentrations of this metalloid. Also, we discovered that there are a lot of elements that have correlations with the concentration of arsenic in this region, and that's why we thought that we needed to continue studying further the relationship between the different elements in water, the arsenic concentration, and the type of rocks that are related to this metalloid. Can we go to the next, please? And then in this publication of 2023 from this year, we discovered that there's in this area of South America, the crust is very thick. It's more than 70 kilometers wide, and that's why the magmas contaminate with peraluminous rocks. It means that the main source in the magma of arsenic is related to sedimentary rocks that are enriched with arsenic, mainly shales. These shales donate certain concentration of arsenic to the magma, and then depending on the explosivity of the eruption, the concentration of arsenic can be higher. In the case of the Altiplano Puna region, the most explosive eruptions and also the ignimbrite bodies are believed to be the ones that contain the higher concentration of this metalloid. And we also, in my country, in Chile, we separated the central volcanic zone volcanism to the southern volcanic zone volcanism, which is related to the Andes Mountains. And there are differences in crust thickness. The crust thickness in the central volcanic zone is higher than the crustal thickness in the southern volcanic zone. And also because of that reason, there's less contamination of the ascending magmas in the southern part of Chile. Well, the concentrations of arsenic in Chile decrease almost exponentially from northern Chile to southern Chile. And also there are less sediments in the trench in northern Chile when we compare to the southern area of the country. So we propose that also the type of subduction that we are going to have in northern Chile is favoring more favoring these higher concentrations of arsenic in the northern region. So our main results indicate that we have to pay attention to silicic outcrops, mainly related to explosive volcanic eruptions, to crustal thickness, to geological structures, because these geological structures may help to the movement of high arsenic fluids. And in the Altiplano Puna region, special attention must be paid to all these geologic features when we're going to choose our water resource. That's all, and many thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Tapia. So now we will stay in the South American continent. We'll listen to Bolivia. So from Bolivia, we have Lisangela. So Lisangela is also a PhD student at KTH Royal Institute of Technology, and she will also extend the knowledge that we have built upon on Jocelyn Tapia's talk about arsenic and geogenic contaminants. So we'll continue listening that, and once Lisangela finishes her presentation, we'll get a short question-answer time. Yeah, over to you, Lisangela.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your introduction. I'm going to present arsenic and geogenic contaminants in groundwater system of the Bolivian Altiplano and drinking water safety. It's known that water is an important component of the life and development of society. One of challenges facing countries worldwide is the provision and adequate quality of water. The map shows the presence of high concentration of arsenic in groundwater used for human consumption is a global problem. Among all the pollens present in groundwater, there are generally...
You have to
So,
share your screen that is presenting the slides. Now we are in presenter's mode. Can you switch?
sorry. Sorry.
Don't worry, we'll not reduce your time. All right, please continue.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Please share the screen that's presenting your slides. So go to the presentation mode, please.
Sorry, I can see the my screen again.
Can you please stop sharing and then you share it once again, the whole screen?
Okay. Now, can you see?
Yeah, now if you go up, there is an option to change the view from presenter to... Right? Yep. Right, you can duplicate. That's fine.
Now? Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay. The map shows the presence of high concentration of arsenic in groundwater for human consumption. And this map was created using data supported by research from different countries in which Bolivia was not included. In Bolivia, only few studies have been conducted regarding the presence of arsenic in drinking water, and the most noteworthy investigations have been carried out mainly in the Bolivian Altiplano within the Sweden cooperation projects. It's important to mention that water contamination by arsenic occurs in rural and poor areas of Bolivia. Between 2008 and 2014, Ormacher reported arsenic concentration of up to 342 micrograms per liter in Popo Lake Basin. Another study conducted 2015 and 2020, Kino reported arsenic concentration of up to 288 micrograms per liter in the Qatari Basin. Our research team is currently conducting studies of the quality of water resource in other areas of the Bolivian Altiplano to generate more information. Primary information was generated through fieldwork, collection of water samples, and laboratory analysis. We work together with the villagers of each place because they are directly affected by drinking water pollution. All information generated is interpreted and digitalized using different tools to report and socialize to villagers, government, and the scientific community. That's all. I thank you for listening and acknowledging all our partners who support this work. Thank you.
Many thanks, Lisangela. Yeah. Thank you so much, all the three presenters, for the first lot of presentation, and we were deep down to the science, the geogenic contaminants and their sources, the solutions that we have discussed, and how it has been used in policy making, in the practice, and so on. So now we will take some questions from the audience, online and offline. So we have volunteers to help you. If you kindly raise your hand, if you have any question for any of our presenters, they are available online. And our honorable panelists, you are also requested to ask any tempting questions if you have. Any question at this point? We got 12 questions online, but since you are, our on-site audience, will prioritize you first. If not, we'll go to the online. Okay, we'll come back to you. Let's listen to. Okay. Do we get one question from Zarif? Can you read that out if there is a question online?
So far, there is no question online.
Okay, all right. Perfect. So, yeah, we got one question from our honorable panelist, Dr. Yoran.
Yeah, no, as the session is about research uptake and the bridging research to policymaking and praxis. So if you have any examples of how your research have translated into action among policymakers or project designers or people sitting on the other side.
Okay, perfect. Do you want to direct it to any of the specific presenter or?
Anybody of the three who feel tempted.
Okay. Professor Jakaria, Professor Tapia. Okay, Professor Jakaria, please go ahead.
Probably you can see me. That's the problem with my
video.
All right, so I think
we can listen to you.
All right, that's fine. Okay, so the question is really interesting because we discussed the two presentations. The first one is the arsenic and how people can get the safe water option. So you have seen there that people are still struggling to get the safe water depth at the village level. So this particular the sediment color issues, if you can develop a policy in the country, the way we prepare the safe water atlas at the village level, and if the government and the policy develop a policy, so every village should have this kind of map, and it should be hang in the local government office at the local level, so the drillers of the tube well and the villages are aware about the safe water options. So that will be really the interesting one. So the policy, this particular research needs to be translated into policy. And the second option or second part of the first presentation is talking about the serious issue, because people started wasting water rather from 300 liter to the 15 to 1,000 liter. So if you don't develop proper policy just to stop this waste, otherwise, and then what will happen actually we can imagine. So the huge amount of water, at least more than 800 liter of water straight people are wasting per households per day. So it's a huge volume of water. So that we need immediate policy attention here, so that we have a sustainable policy just to meet people's requirement, not only for drinking purposes, but also other maintaining other requirements. So that's we can see the link here, the research and the policy. And the second part of my research is basically talking about the sanitation practice. It's very hard for Bangladesh to sort of track record or the keep track of the people who are sort of dislodging where their the fecal sludge. So if the system is developed like this, it will be easy for you to identify the people who are not practicing hygienic sanitation, practicing sanitation in a hygienic way. So I think if government also takes an initiative, develop a policy for everyone, then it will be easier for us to achieve the SDG goals as well as to improve the overall water and sanitation situation at the local level. So probably I answered something. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jakaria. Any other question? Yes, Julia have one more question for you.
Thank you very much. My name is Julia Schalk. I'm Policy and Program Director of WaterAid Sweden. I was wondering on the same topic, sort of how we translate research to policy. If any of the other speakers would like to reflect if you worked with other stakeholders outside the research community in order to translate or communicate the results from your research. So which stakeholders outside the research community have you worked with, and how do you see that can benefit, if it can, your work?
I can start.
Perfect.
In general, it's really hard to communicate with, in the Chilean case. I'm not going to talk about other countries because that's the experience here. It's, first of all, you have to make a lot of work with the politicians. You have to be able to make changes in our constitution or in our environmental laws. We need to be in contact like most of the time. It's a lot of time that we have to use, and for the scientific community, it's really hard to spend more than 50% of our time in trying to connect with the authorities. So I think in general, in all the South American countries, there's a missing lag between, I'm talking about South America, a missing lag between the research, people researching, and people in politics and stakeholders and all the rest of the community to be able to make laws. In Chile, we don't have a law for soils. We have a water law that was made around 2006, but we don't have any regulation for soils or for sediments. So we're very behind with these items and with these issues. And it's mainly because our geology is very particular. We have naturally high concentrations of some elements like arsenic or copper. And then if there's a law limiting the contents of some of these elements, there are going to be a lot of problems with the economic, mainly the mining. That's the Chilean mining is the main economic source we have. So there are some advancements, but it's something that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. It's not easy, but at least with our efforts, now we're talking about a law for soil. It's not ready, but it's a work in progress. I don't know if Bolivia is the same. I don't know if Lisangela can say something about the Bolivian case.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Sorry, but we have to wrap up this part of this question answers. So we have to move to the next section of presentation. I will take the questions afterwards if there are any for our presenters, but Maria Armienta, she will be presenting experience from Mexico, but she's unfortunately not present, like she's not presenting online, but it's a recorded presentation. So we'll listen to her. But before that, just an announcement for the audience on site. For the interaction you make, we also have some quiz at the end of the session, so please listen carefully. So the quiz will be from the presentations and the discussions. So we will love to hear from you. It's not about only the question. You can also interact. You can comment on the work they have done, how they can, improve their work in connection to the thing that Julia and Joran has cited, that how to, build upon the work and work with the practitioners and also the government. All right, so we'll listen to Maria. Thank you.
Good afternoon. In this presentation, we will talk about some contributions of science to the solution of groundwater arsenic contamination in Mexico. Facts and thoughts. It is important to say that groundwater supplies more than 60% of drinking water of the country, and arsenic is not regularly measured. So, the determination of the occurrence and concentration is very important. In this map, we can see the red dots that correspond to the highest arsenic concentrations, and mainly they are located in central and northwestern Mexico, and some orange dots that also are above the WHO guidelines, and this implies an exposed population of about 1.5 million people at risk. We have published these facts in the book Towards the Fulfillment of the Human Right to Water, Arsenic and Fluoride in Water, that is co-authored by 60 researchers and members of the civil society. Well, the health effects of arsenic have been studied at the beginning at Comarca Lagunera, northern Mexico, where peripheral vascular disease, keratosis, skin cancer, cytogenetic damage were found, and the rural population is exposed to high arsenic levels. At Zimapan, Hidalgo State, we found skin pigmentation change, diabetes, and this was published since 1997. In this presentation, we will talk about some contributions of science to the solution of groundwater arsenic contamination in Mexico. Facts and thoughts. It is important to say that groundwater supplies more than 60% of drinking water of the country, and arsenic is not regularly measured. So, the determination of the occurrence and concentration is very important. In this map, solutions and the effort has the red dots that correspond identify the sources at each contamination.
Okay, I'm really sorry, we are having some technical difficulties. The second slide is mixed with the first one, so maybe while we fix it, we can have the presentation from Anna. Anna is physically present here, and she's not going to use any overheads, so feel free to interact with her. And Anna is a researcher from Stockholm University, and she will share the randomized experiment, learning from randomized experiments. Right. Over to you, Anna. Thank you.
Thanks, Tamid, and it's a pleasure as always still to be here in person. I haven't got over the joy of talking to real people instead of black boxes on a Zoom screen. So I sort of want to, I don't have slides. I wanted to be a little bit more philosophical today, thinking about, the theme of this slide, of this session was about linking research to impact. But it's quite a rare opportunity for us to get a chance to talk to a room full of, policymakers and practitioners. So I sort of want to take advantage of this rather selfishly for me. So how I ended up here, standing in this room, I started out as an engineer. As a young engineer, I was sort of frustrated, but sometimes by the the evidence base on which we were given policy recommendations, and particularly in the sphere of sort of social and economic questions about engineering. So just to give you an example, as a young engineer seated in the audience of a session a bit like this a long time ago, I asked, it was a session about participation in development. And I asked, I think, a reasonable question, which was, how do you balance technical expertise with participation? So, is there a trade-off here between, like, there's expertise on one side, but there's also this desire to decentralize and to involve communities in decision-making? And I got shot down really hard. I got told that I was, a technocrat obsessed with engineering and, anti-participation. But that wasn't really my question at all. And in retrospect, having thought about this question now for 20 years, I feel my question was reasonable. Even the most sort of ardent advocate of decentralization wouldn't say that we should build a well in an unsafe location just because it was number one on the list of a community's priorities. So, out of this frustration, I went back to grad school. I was lucky enough to get a place to study sustainable development at Columbia in New York. I learned statistics, I learned economics, and then since about 2008, I've been working on a long series of randomized experiments in the theme of providing safe drinking water in rural Bangladesh, a place that, like many of the contexts we've talked about today, is really affected by the arsenic crisis. So why do we run randomized experiments? Well, they help us get around a problem, right? If we just look at past experience, it's really difficult to answer the question definitively, what would have happened if you'd done something different? So you can look at a project that implemented one model about participatory decision-making or rules about community contributions, and you can say what happened, but you don't know what would have happened if you'd implemented the same project under different rules in the same community. And so randomized experiments really fill that gap. So they let you test, two approaches to running the same project that ex ante, it's not obvious which is better. We may have pros and cons to both. And they let you sort of run them head to head and because you randomly assign them to communities, you get statistically equivalent populations that you're running them in, and you're really able to make a causal statement about changes and impact that happen as a consequence. And so, since then, mostly in collaboration with my colleague Ahsan Habib, who's not here today. He's a grad student at KTH under Prashun and my supervision, but he's also, speaking of collaborating with other institutions, he is the head of research and monitoring and evaluation at a long-established NGO in Bangladesh. So he has one foot in research and one foot in policy. So over the years, we've built, hundreds of wells across communities in Bangladesh, in hundreds of different communities. We've been collecting data I think now we're into sort of tens of thousands of households worth of data. We've been following, including kind of comprehensive water quality testing. We've been following these projects now for up to 15 years, so we don't just walk away after the first round of data collection. We've actually traced what happens to them over time. And, out of this body of research, we've started to generate insights. So sometimes it's a little frustrating. The answer you get back can be the common sense answer in the first place. It turns out that giving communities the right to take decisions improves outcomes, but only if you put in place sort of measures that make decision-making more inclusive, more democratic, that cut down the risk of elite capture. Otherwise, you transfer decision-making rights to communities, and powerful people just, make sure they end up with the benefits of the projects themselves. Maybe that's common sense, but sometimes, and I'm reminded of my experience as a young engineer, sometimes common sense is in shorter supply than we would like it to be in the real world. So that's where this kind of evidence, I hope, can help. But in truth, and so that's a little bit of a plug of what we're doing, why we're doing it. To tell you everything we've learned would take more than the 5 minutes I'm allotted. So there's a little bit of a plug to go and check out what we're doing if it's interesting to you. But I have to say, despite many years of work and analysis and implementation, I don't feel like we're doing a great job at making those insights available to policymakers, or they're not. I don't see them translated immediately into changes in practice. And so in a way, sometimes there's a tension, right, between how much we have only a finite amount of time. There's always 12 million things to do, and the time we spend on promoting our research is time we're not spending actually getting research out the door, which is a personal tension we have to deal with. But really, we're here. I sort of want to flip the question back to you guys. Many of you are policymakers, many of you are practitioners. I wanted to ask you, what can we do better about getting information from our work beyond publishing in academic research journals, which we have to do to keep employed. But beyond that, what else can we do? How do you guys seek out new information? What makes you change your mind about something? And how, in general, can we do a better job at helping that process? So that was what I...
Thank you so much, Anna. So we will hear from the audience the question that Anna has already posted. But let's try to listen to Maria once again. We'll try. If that doesn't work, then we'll go directly to the discussion session. We'll not say question answer, but yeah. We don't hear anything. No. Can you press once again?
Good afternoon. In this
Yeah, it
presentation,
started.
we will talk about some contributions of science to the solution of groundwater arsenic contamination in Mexico. Facts and thoughts. It is important to say that groundwater supplies more than 60% of drinking water of the country, and arsenic is not regularly measured. So, the determination of the occurrence and concentration is very important. In this map, we can see these red dots that correspond to the highest arsenic concentrations, and mainly they are located in central and northwestern Mexico, and some orange dots that also are above the WHO guidelines, and this implies an exposed population of about 1.5 million people at risk. We have published these facts in the book Towards the Fulfillment of the Human Right to Water, Arsenic and Fluoride in Water, that is co-authored by 60 researchers and members of the civil society. Well, the health effects of arsenic have been studied at the beginning at Comarca Lagunera, northern Mexico, where peripheral vascular disease, keratosis, skin cancer, cytogenetic damage were found, and the rural population is exposed to high arsenic levels. At Zimapan, Hidalgo State, we found skin pigmentation. Well, another important scientific effort has been developed to identify the sources at each contaminated site. At Comarca Lagunera, many researchers have identified natural as magmatic process originating an hydrothermal system, desorption from clays and iron hydroxides, evaporation and sulfides oxidation, but also anthropogenic sources like the use of insecticides in the last century and currently intensive abstraction. Mining areas are other zones where arsenic is present in groundwater in Mexico, like Zimapan, central Mexico, where studies including hydrogeology, geology, and mineralogy and geochemistry identified a natural source in the limestone fractured aquifer due to the presence of arsenic-rich minerals. This contaminated the deep wells that were used as drinking water sources, and some of them are still used to that aim. Well, the main processes corresponding to these studies are arsenoparite oxidation and scorodite dissolution. We measure arsenic in rocks, and it reached very high levels out of possibly anthropogenic sources. And we also developed isotopic and geochemical modeling to identify the source. But also in these areas, like as you see, are very extended in Mexico, we find other anthropogenic pollution sources like tailings from the processing of minerals. At Simapan, we studied in detailed way the tailings, and we found that arsenoparite oxidation in tailings and smelter fumes contaminated shallow wells. But these wells are used mainly for house cleaning and irrigation. Of solutions and the development of alternatives. One is to identify safe water sources, if possible, the elimination of anthropogenic sources. This includes remediation options like the use of plants or some rocks from the same areas, the development of affordable and site-suitable water treatment options, for example, including adsorption materials like iron oxidroxide, limestone, plants, nanomaterials, rain harvesting systems, and establishment and collaboration with the authorities to the adequate maintenance and operation of treatment systems. Of course, education and capacity building. We have the scientific community has developed these tags in many areas of the country. This is important to remark that the joint actions of the academic society and authorities are required to solve this problem. Well, we invite you to visit this book. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maria. Yeah, we can clap, but we will share it. We will share back this presentation, the whole recording with her, so she can listen to us. Okay, thank you. So Anna, may I call upon you to the stage? And perhaps the question that you pose to audience, if anyone want to, reflect on that.
I realize I actively invited people to come with comments rather than questions. So
Right.
That's on me.
Yeah, Dara got some question, reflection to be shared.
Thank you. My name is Dara Johnston. I work for UNICEF. Currently, I'm in South Sudan, but before I was in Bangladesh, working with these guys. And I thinking about the experience of Bangladesh and arsenic, and then seeing how it's now being discovered in South America. So I'm just wondering, are all the learnings from? I know that the scientific learnings are clearly being translated to South America, but what about the other challenges? I mean, there was a whole challenge of actually recognizing there was an arsenic problem in Bangladesh to begin with, and then having policy actions put in place. And now it's many decades down the road, so there's a lot of learnings in that. Are they being translated? Are they being used also in other parts of the world that have arsenic problems?
So that's probably something I would have to punt on to people who work mostly in other parts of the world, because most of my work is in Bangladesh. I think for the kind of things that we've been working on are really about the tensions between, we started out working in a context where, you go back sort of 20 years in time, Bangladesh was, in a totally different place on the development trajectory to where it is today. And the model there was really thinking about providing community wells. Now, I don't know, this is a trade-off, because if you're in parts of Latin America today, you're probably further along that development curve already. People are probably not talking about building community wells. Indeed, if we look at the higher income world today, you know, people exclusively make this transition to having a private source of water in their home. And that's what Sustainable Development Goals are telling us to do. And even in Bangladesh, which is, you know, recently became a middle income country, we're at that cusp of realizing that there's really no longer much demand for community wells, even if they're safe. And people are really interested in going to that next level of having a private water source in their home. So I feel like I'm not sure if I fully answered your question. I think there's insights that we have from Bangladesh that are sort of unique to where Bangladesh has been on its development trajectory. I'm not sure how good we are. You know, at some point we had a moment of reflection that we'd spent the last 13 years or so building wells in Bangladesh, and in the time that we've been doing that, Bangladesh has changed unrecognizably. And you know, at some point we've decided that we should change. And so our next projects going forward, they're all about building these rural pipeline systems and seeing if we can, you know, move on from that. So I feel like it's tricky to, the kind of work we do is sort of unique to a moment in a development trajectory. I'm not sure, I'm not in truth sure how well it will translate to other places. I feel like Prashant has something he wanted to say.
Because there is a minimum gap in my working time in KTH. We started with 1999, 2000. We started with our understanding the arsenic mobilization mechanism. That was the first project of its kind, again, thanks to CEDA. And during that time when we started working. But contemporary, if we look into Bolivia, for example, the projects in Bolivia started in 2006. So there is a natural gap of those years, you know. So by the time what we have achieved in Bangladesh, it will take another few years to catch up with the trend, because now with the much faster technology, much faster communication, much faster publications work, and our experience, huge volume of experience what you have gathered, Bangladesh is now a role model for understanding arsenic dynamics in the environment, arsenic mitigation, and also national initiatives by the national governments. So this is what we need to promote. Then our experience with the UNICEF, the partnership with the government of Bangladesh, and this is one thing which I am propagating now with other governments. You know, this is the model how Bangladesh government and we are integrating. We are sitting on the same table to discuss the problem, looking into the local level participation in different projects. So that's how, I mean, this is the scenario we are going to adopt. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant, for the supplement. I'll come back to you, Matthias, but before that, I'll take John's reflection. Yeah.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. My name is John Akudago. In fact, I wanted to ask, or maybe give a suggestion as you asked the question. We do this research because we want to improve health. And the question is, do we really get the research to those who need the information? It is always ending at the government level. We discuss this as researchers, we discuss this as development practitioners, and it ends there. How should we, as maybe practitioners, convert the message here from Stockholm directly to somebody in a village in Kurigram, or directly to somebody in a village in maybe Bolivia, to understand that this was discussed at Stockholm? And these days, it's much easier to do things. We have the social media. We have all the music that you can sing about anything, and it is heard in Ghana, even though it's in Swedish. Why don't we find a way to convert some of the messages that are key, that are very relevant to the health of our people that we are seeking to improve their well-being, be converted? Instead of putting a lot of academic publications and we read and read and reread, and then in 10 years we'll go back and do research again to come back with the same information, and it doesn't get anywhere. So I think we can, one, learn to translate some of the practical research into action where people can just listen to them without necessarily waiting for the government to make policies. Because if I know this would kill me, I would run away from it first before waiting for government to bring military to protect me. That's the first thing. The second thing is the NGOs that are working closely with the government. Can we also put a little bit of pressure on the government, not in a forceful manner, but convince them that the message that we are bringing in is to help the people. So in what way can we translate this into all information that you need to pass to the people? And so I think we can do that. We can also trickle down some of the information even through our schools. The primary education level, children take things very seriously compared to we even adults. So why can't we convert this into simple messages and pass it to the schools and let them carry it home to their parents, to those who cannot read and write? Thank you so much.
Those are super great points.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a lot of feedback.
Excellent
if you do
points,
this.
John.
Those are really, really awesome points. So the one thing I'll say with the arsenic problem is that I think there are limits to how much people can solve, entirely independently. So there were studies in the past which basically just tried to give people more information. And they said, okay, we'll go and run a blank testing of wells, and we'll give people that information, and we'll see if they can, cope themselves. And what would that look like in rural Bangladesh? So the arsenic contamination problem, it's a patchwork problem. It doesn't, just because you have two wells next to each other, maybe they have different depths, it doesn't mean that because one is contaminated, it doesn't mean that its neighbor is contaminated. So the idea was, you give people information, they will just, reallocate. So they'll say, okay, my well's contaminated, but can I use your well? And people will agree. And so some of the early evidence on that was very encouraging, because it looked like there was a big response in terms of well switching. Like if you looked what people did, there was a big behavioral change. But then when we look at that in our data, when we have kind of more comprehensive data, what we see is that people are changing their behavior, they're changing the wells they use, but what they're typically doing in the places where we work, they're just digging a new shallow well. And if you have a well that's arsenic contaminated and then you replace it with a well that goes down to the same arsenic contaminated layer, these are the cheapest wells to build because they're, you don't have to go so deep. In places where we work, you really have to go, a couple of 100 meters underground to hit arsenic safe water. And so although we saw a lot of behavioral change, it actually makes sort of zero difference to arsenic exposure, because people are just replacing wells with another well from the same community that isn't any more likely to be arsenic safe than the wells that people are already using. So that kind of behavioral change message, I think it's sort of got limited legs. People already know about the arsenic problem. Arsenic is a little bit of a noxious problem, right? It's invisible, you can't taste it, you can't smell it, and it's the kind of pollutant that builds up gradually in your body over years. So, you're a poor household, you have many other competing priorities for your time. This problem, maybe it doesn't reach the top of your to-do list. So when we build safe wells in communities, we see that take up of the wells of people who live right next to them, it's about 40%. So that's the person who lives right next to the well, on average, is collecting 40% of their drinking water. Some of them are collecting it all, some of them don't adopt it at all, some of them use different sources. And that drops off to zero about 1 minute's walk away. So people, have competing priorities for their time. There's only so much that they can do independently. So I guess even though I'm an economist, I'm a big believer in, the public sphere, and how do we get to that solution, either through kind of collective action or through NGOs or through government action, whatever works in whatever situation you're in. And then to your second point about working with NGOs, I think that's really that's been a strength of the work that I've been doing, that I've been collaborating with the same NGO for a long time. My colleague now is, he started out working, the very first project we worked on together, he started out as an enumerator, the guy who collects data in the field. He ended up being a co-author on the paper, which I think is a unique trajectory in the history of research, to go from being the guy with the, just literally filling out forms in the field, to being being one of 3 co-authors on the paper. Now he's doing a PhD, and I feel like increasingly, he's in an amazing position to start, having those conversations that you're talking about. But those were all great points. They're well taken.
Thank you so much, Anna. So we are running out of time. So for the sake of time, thank you so much for the timing.
Thank you, guys.
All right. So let me welcome our honorable panelists. And let me start with Dr. Göran Holmqvist. So he's a director at SIDA and responsible for the departments of Asia, Middle East, and humanitarian assistance. And he got extensive experience in different managerial positions and also with research-related activities. And then, unfortunately, the chief executive of WaterAid Sweden is not able to present. So Julia Schalk is taking her place, and she is the Director for Policy and Program Partnership for WaterAid Sweden. And let me also welcome Dr. Prasun Bhattacharya, who is the professor at KTH Royal Institute of Technology, and we can call him Arsenic Man, as we have been discussing just before the session. All right, so with vast experience, Prasun, please come on that right side.
Thank you.
So with all this vast experience from this profound, panelist, I'll just start with a very simple one, and maybe with Yuran. And of course, we'll get some time for you, the audience that are present here today. So when it comes to, scientific concept, how do you see them? Like how to materialize them, how to put them in the policy and the practice from your end, from your vast experience? You have been working with development, as a development partner for the countries for all the years.
Yeah, I have one particularity in my career is that I have switched back and forth from being a practitioner within SIDA or elsewhere, or spending time in academia or think tanks or places where the aim is to actually make research having an impact. So I think I've moved back and forth 8 times now. Each move is extremely frustrating because when you move over to the researchers, the understanding of relevance and what practitioners and policy makers need, it's so shallow. And the willingness to spend time on learning and understanding that kind of world, I mean, the incentives are not there for it, at least not if you go to the academic universities, I would say. Then you move back to the practitioner side in SIDA, and you are so frustrated with the bureaucrats who are so kind of, it's what's going on for tomorrow that matters, and why spend time on these big things, and frustrated with all the research that doesn't actually make any difference to your job. So I've been engaged then on both sides with kind of messages. So I pointed out 6 messages to each one. So I can share them. So what I tend to tell researchers when I come to the research side. So the number 1 is readiness to invest time and effort to understand the other side. That it's so different, who you speak to on the other side. Is it a lawmaker? Is it an engineer who is about to make a project design? Is it people like me in SIDA who are funding projects? You really have to read well who you are talking to, who's your target audiences, what is their decision space. So at some level of the organization, the decision space might be, at project level, which project to choose, how to implement it. At another level, it might be, large policy orientations that you need to target. So invest time and effort in that. I think that's important. Obviously, I think that was mentioned before, the importance of involving potential users in the research process. That's often cited as sort of success factors. It's a way of researchers to understand relevance and obviously also to pick up, the key questions. Number 3, to use all dissemination strategies. You need. Don't think that people in organizations like SIDA never read peer-reviewed articles. They do occasionally. They also want a brief, and maybe a nice presentation, and maybe a YouTube, and maybe you have to fill all the gaps in terms of dissemination strategies. And then I think it's important to understand that you should never expect the causal link from research to policy or practice to follow a nice straight causal line. It's kind of messy, Nothing happens for 4 years, and suddenly year 5, there was a moment when things kicked in. So that's, I think, to temper the frustration within inertia on the receiving side, among practitioners, it's important to remember that. And then 6, media exposure matters, and particularly if you want to reach politicians. So if it's in media, it has happened, and they have to relate to it, and they might get nervous by it and so on. So engaging with media as part of your strategy is quite important. And what do I tell the bureaucrats? It's like, number one, engaging with the researchers, it's a bit like fishing. You know, you occasionally get something on your hook, but many times you just sit there waiting, you know. Come research, it doesn't matter, it wasn't particularly interesting, we already knew it, or we can't use it. But you need that patience, you know, to wait for this when you really get the important stuff. And bureaucrats may have difficulties in understanding that. You need the patience, you need to occasionally not get something on your hook, and occasionally you do, and it's very important.
And just to pause here, maybe I'll ask Julia.
Could I just to...
okay, a few more points?
I have a few. So these messages for the bureaucrats. So number two, to be curious, and many bureaucrats are not. So be ready to be surprised, and don't have an instrumentalist view on research, that it should necessarily produce evidence that support what you are doing today or what your boss have told you to do. And number three, to think beyond tomorrow. Don't be so over-focused on what you need today, but also, you know, look down the path, because this is like an investment many times. Number four, engage with the researchers in the research process. That's sort of the mirror of the other advice to the researchers. We need to engage at an early stage of the research process to improve the relevance of what's being done. And finally, within our organizations, the importance of creating incentives for people to actually care about evidence. So when you take decisions, you should ask about evidence if you're a manager. And organizations should have policies that create incentives for that. And finally, I think it's very important for organizations like CEDA to create space for innovation and new thinking. So even if you have to focus most of your time and money and whatever on some well-known paths, create some small space for the new stuff.
Perfect.
Very important.
Yeah. Thank you, Göran. So, Julia, you are just in the middle, right? So there, the government counterpart is there, the academia is here. So how do you see these factors, what Göran have said? Like, do you agree with him, with the key factors that these will bring successful collaboration between academia and the policymakers?
Absolutely. It was good. I didn't even think about that I was actually in a minute. But that is actually, if you consider what an organization like WaterAid could add to the conversation, I think. And I just wanted to add into the presentation, I'm also vice chair of a Swedish government committee evaluating aid. And in that role, it's very much translating research into policy-relevant reports. So this is a favorite topic of mine. But just to bring that, I usually don't wear dual hats, but I thought for this conversation it would be interesting to add. I think Göran points out very sort of elaborate, obviously, with your experience, good points. And I think one of the key successes from WaterAid side and also from personal experience is really to recognize the different roles and mandates that we have, and researchers are often quite reluctant of even perhaps providing policy messages. A lot of researchers would refrain from actually going so far, and do not have, and it's not in their obviously experience or professional career to have a communication background or a political background, or so they're doing very important research. And I think an organization like WaterAid can add a layer of, so then how do we translate these research messages? Because also WaterAid has policy staff, we have advocacy staff, we can do political and economic analysis of a country context. We would understand, for example, what you talked about, that we cannot deliver even the same data to a water operator in municipality compared to a parliamentarian at national level. So understanding that whole, that add a political and economic analysis to research, even if it's in another sector, I think is important. But that also means that
as an organization taking on that responsibility, I'd say, we need to be careful that we understand research. So it's not about finding, because the risk, obviously, of confirmation bias is very high. We have an agenda. We have something that we want to say. So taking also, if we do take on that, we need to ensure that we have a good understanding of what research is, that we can translate the messages, that we don't create irrelevant or even irresponsible messages, and understand what sort of a basic understanding of research, so that we don't find an article that, well, this would confirm what we want to say. So that's also very important. But I think once the really good collaborations that I think I've had is really where we understand sort of that research is also, consequence neutral. Many researchers want to keep it that way, but we can help sharing those in a better way. And I think when you understand those roles, it's really beneficial.
Perfect. Thank you, Julia. So to follow through, Prasoon, how do you see them? Like you have been working with the research or academia for almost like 25 years, right? Yeah. So how do you see, like, when you are communicating to the policymakers, what are your key strategies that you follow actually that made you successful?
Actually, this is a very good question. Actually, I was trying to add on to this because, it is something, which I would say to my fellow academia people that come out of your natural shells, It's something which, arsenic is an element which emits energy, and that is what brings in, diverse actors, light emitting diodes, some sort of things. So you need, like, we have been working with CEDA all the time, right from the formulation of the SASMIT project, which was engaging the local community-based arsenic mitigation program. And this was made in collaboration with CEDA, right from the formulation. So that training which we received, within the academia. So today we have a capacity at KTH to compete and combat the whole issue towards this main focus program. So what I would suggest that, yes, this is a key importance that we should really think about by collaborating with the local actors. Like way back, some of my key experience with the local level, local drillers.
But before you go to the key experience, maybe if you say a few words about
research,
the IPAM. So IPAM is
exactly
right. So you can cite the examples.
So that's one. When we talk about this IPAM, Integrated Protocol for Sustainable, or IPSAM actually, IPSAM Sustainable Arsenic Mitigation, which is a follow-up of SASMIT project, and engaging. Now, yes, I would like to emphasize that CEDA has been always a driving force, because it was when implementing SASMIT, we understood the scientific processes operating, understanding, locating the arsenic safe wells, and validating the research results. Then it was a time how to propagate that knowledge to the people. So then the dissemination. Who are the key stakeholders? Identify the key stakeholders. Firstly, was the government of Bangladesh. We had several local consultative group meetings, LCG meetings since 2014 onwards. And the entire process, now we are sitting together with the people from the government of Bangladesh. And this has taken a decade, 10 years, from 2012 to 2022. And that's it. You have to develop this culture. It's sort of a building trust among people, so that academia, even water aid, for example, we have been working in different lines. And also, there was a question which you could call in Ghana, for example. It's not only arsenic, it's fluoride in the entire African continent, which is a major issue, and which needs to be, and it's even in Mexico, in Tanzania, in Argentina and the Bolivian tract, the huge arsenic fluoride and all the geogenic contaminants. We need to tackle this. We need to tackle this. Our SASMIT is essentially what we developed as a philosophy of action. And EPSC, which is our current project with the UNICEF, that is enhancing the private sector capacity. Because in local level, it's not the government who is always engaged in a safe water source. It is we ourselves.
Yeah.
So we need to, I mean, this private sector has to be emphasized, and that's thanks to UNICEF, those who have really realized this importance of engaging the private sector, capacitizing them, and also registering them so that what they are doing.
Thank you, Prasun. So you have touched upon the strategies actually. So I'll go back to Julia. So what strategies WaterAid will follow, or right now they're following to stay up to date with the researchers? We have seen a number of excellent researchers from different continents, right? So how do you see them? How to interpret or translate this into practice?
WaterAid has for sort of different levels to that, but we have a global unit of policy advisors, which sole job is basically to follow research within specific areas that are relevant for WaterAid. But then we also have the country programs, of course, with contacts with the academia in their respective countries, but also practical experience. Let's not forget sort of that, how valid that also is in terms of knowledge management. And as a federation, our ambition is, and continuous work is, how do we ensure knowledge management without the whole federational system, to working with country programs and experience and taking that into the policy people's research connections. And we do have, so concretely, sort of, we often work with academia for specific reports. We do some in-house, but in terms of actual research, we do a lot of collaborations with academia. And that would go for both country level and national level. So, for example, we published that I'm hoping is relevant, contributed to conversation, a groundwater report together with the British Geological Survey that really emphasized that how much groundwater actually exists in Africa, but the challenge is more of a social and economic aspect to ensure that we are able to bring those groundwater reserves into taps and investments in that. But we also did, for example, another study together with Vivid Economics on the business case for water and sanitation and hygiene. Also, both of them were extremely sort of well received by policymakers in that sense. In Bangladesh, I won't speak, but it was a very important, one of the first study during the COVID epidemic that really looked at detected the SARS virus in wastewater samples, and by that way could detect the virus. So all of those are based on the strategy that we produce research together with researchers based on what would help our strategy to implement. So there's also, I'm back to, there's a purpose for our research. We don't obviously do research for the sake of research, which researchers actually should. But we do have a purpose. But when we can do that complementary, that's when it works very well and are well received by policymakers.
Thank you, Julia. So now I'm heading towards Yuran. So what role do you see SIDA can play to accelerate this change? Like now we are shifting towards that.
I think when it comes to SIDA and the use of evidence, it's sort of a story about a glass half full, half empty. So you can, depending on what you want, you can point out things that are both embarrassing and good. But we are a large funder of research globally and also among various sort of actors like you, who have the aim of sort of translating research into policy making. So that's one important role. We are also an uptaker of research and try to organize ways of getting that connection between our people who prepare projects and take decisions and academia. So for a number of themes, we have help desks, which are kind of established contracts, and the civil servant can then call up the help desk, and the help desk would then provide, a summary of whatever the state of the art is on a particular issue. So all these things are important, but you can also be frustrated. I think the incentive structure is still not strong enough. There is also sort of the bias that exists in occasionally simply the political level decides do X. Is there any point in making research about whether we should do X or not? No, it's like people, it's already decided, why debate it? And that way of kind of closing down the debates occasionally, I think that's also something that we can suffer from when it comes to curiosity and actually going that extra mile of reviewing priorities.
Right. Thank you so much, Yuran. So keeping time in our time is almost running out. We're just 5 minutes away. So yeah, I'll get back to you, Julia. But if we have any question from the audience, please raise your hand. And meanwhile, we'll just listen to Julia for 30 seconds.
I actually want to leave as well with a call to action, because I think that us as a community, as a water community, is successful in this regard is really important at this point. So we just did a study actually on aid to water and sanitation and hygiene, and it's dropping. And I think one of the really reasons is that we do not provide data well enough to policymakers and explain both the importance but also how, and being innovative enough. So it's a more of a joint call to action that we do become better at translating research into policy, all of us together.
Fantastic. Thank you. Prasun, you'd like to add something
just
for 30
point,
seconds?
Again, what we talk about research, it should not, now it is time for action research. So that's a one-word thing. So we need to focus on action research in general. And also science to policy, because several corporations now have an inbuilt component of training people for policy, how these researchers are getting into the policies. So those are the two key information.
Thank you so much, honorable panelists. We have to finish our panel discussion now, and we'll move to the concluding remarks or takeaways from the session. To be very precise, we'll listen to Dr. Tanvir, and we also have maybe one last question for the audience from our side as a quiz. We have a small gift, so just to get that one. But once Dr. Tanvir concludes or shares the takeaway, we will do that. Thank you so much, Yuran, Yulia, and Prasun. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I've been listening very, very carefully and attentively throughout this session. It has been wonderful, and it's a hard job of closing the session or summarizing the session, but I'll try my best. We've listened to the stage was set by Mr. Mustafizur Rahman quite nicely, talked about innovation and the importance of scaling up, and just touched the point that we need more communication. Then kind of the session took on through these three researchers, and the further discussion mainly focused on the importance of communication. Dr. Jakaria basically presented an ICT-based solution, and he presented two examples of how we can use the ICT to address our fecal sludge management problem. Pinpoint areas where service has to be delivered, these web-based application systems. It's very important because all our mitigation measures has to be driven by data. And there is these sort of systems are important if we can provide better because these can provide better communication tools. In this modern age, you have SMS and ICT-based technology, which can really optimize this service delivery context. Then the two presentations from Dr. Joseline and Lizangela basically talked about the challenges of arsenic in the respective areas in the South Americas, and also a presentation from Maria from Mexico. They basically put forward the different contexts, how the geological formations are affecting the arsenic contaminations, but both of them highlighted the fact that it's becoming increasingly challenging to communicate with the policymakers on their findings. And these are extremely technical in nature. How they are going to communicate it with the higher policy levels and what sort of mitigation measures will come out of them, it still remains unclear. But Maria from Mexico, she presented a way that they published a book which involves the contribution from civil society. So it's a one way of having a better communication. So if the academia and civil society can come together, jointly publish these things with their messages, it can be a tool. Then Dr. Anna, she presented, basically talked about her experience in Bangladesh, how she used randomized experiments to determine different practices for arsenic mitigation in Bangladesh. She pointed out the issue of elite capture, which Bangladesh, where I'm from, is suffering very much. And although this is common sense, but still she mentioned it's also very important that you actually need to provide real data, even if it's a common sense thing, that you actually need these information to put it forward in front of the policymakers, some solid numbers that even a common sense thing can be made more evident. And then I think the most interesting discussion was this panel from Dr. Yoran, Julia, and Dr. Proshun, where I think this session has reached its climax when, in terms of the real challenges and what each of us, this researchers and communities and bureaucrats, what we are facing, what we need to do. Dr. Yoran highlighted the fact initially, like we need to understand each other, both the bureaucrats and the researchers. And Dr. Proshun actually mentioned this example that we had in Bangladesh, that this early engagement with the government, with SIDA, that means the funders, and the researcher community, this can be a very ideal example of how a difficult problem like elite capture or arsenic mitigation can be handled if we have engagement from stakeholders early on. Particularly in this project, we had engagements from DPHE, the government, SIDA, and the researchers from the day one. So, and that actually helped this eventual buy-in from all parties, even the government, for successfully mitigating these things. The importance of having good communication materials has also come out. Dr. Yoran mentioned that we need to have like policy briefs, good, because the bureaucrats do not have enough time. So you need to have these kind of materials which you can look at a glance and see what sort of information can be consumed in a very limited amount of time. Media exposure is important, and communication with all levels from government. If it's the local government, then it's the local government, and even the private parties, the drillers that was mentioned by Dr. Proshun. It's also, you have to, there is no limit. All those who are stakeholders, everybody has to be consulted.
Last 30 seconds for you.
Thank you. So, but in the last 30 seconds, I just want to mention that there has been some good examples also in Bangladesh. Not, of course, this GOB UNICEF project, but there are other areas where we have developed policy guidelines in close consultation with the government. And in many of these policies, the instigation of what initiated this policy is just from basic research. Could be the arsenic mitigation policies, like which treatment technologies we should be prioritizing in mitigation, that came from research. The REACH project, which is looking at professional O&M and blending finance with Oxford University, from day one, it has a buy-in from the government because they are involved in the research from day one. And also, these arsenic mitigation, the managed aquifer recharge guidelines, which is coming through, it is also emanating from research. So lastly, I'd like to say that this is the SDG era, and we actually need to accelerate, leveraging science to accelerate change. Our country and many other countries are lagging behind in the SDG targets, and we need to accelerate. One of the important accelerators is, among the 5 accelerators, one of the most important is innovation. And innovation, that's where science comes in. That's why we are talking about leveraging science. And in this innovation accelerator, it's very, very important that it's not only the new scientific understanding the technology that will be important here. You have to have, it's mentioned there, that these things has to be scaled up, these things has to be better communicated, and a collaborative approach is required. Even you can have a very good technology, you need to scale it up, and if you want to scale it up, you need communication, you need better buy-in from government and larger stakeholders. So this is an important accelerator. So only the innovation or your laboratory work or what you do inside your university is not going to carry it through. For that, you need buy-in from a wide range of stakeholders. So with that, I'd like to finish.
Okay.
Hopefully, I summarized adequately in a short amount of time.
Absolutely, but
I know
it's really hard to complete this whole bunch of discussion within 5 minutes. Thank you so much, Dr. Tanvir. So with that note, we'll actually close this session. We have one question for you, and that was actually, what is the atomic number of arsenic? So whoever know that, just raise your hand, please. Anyone? What's the atomic number of arsenic? No? Okay, done. Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll see you next year.